The $20 bill landed on the marble counter with a soft slap that somehow cut through the morning noise of the First National Bank lobby. Miguel Reyes hadn't meant for it to be dramatic. His hand was simply shaking too much to set it down gently. "This is everything I have left," he said quietly, looking directly at Richard Thornton across the counter. "I need to wire it to my mother in Guadalajara. She hasn't eaten in 2 days." Richard Thornton, senior branch manager, didn't look up from his computer screen. The fluorescent lights reflected off his expensive watch, a Rolex Submariner that cost more than Miguel made in 6 months of laying brick in the Arizona heat. At 47, Thornton had the kind of face that had learned to smile without meaning it, the practiced expression of someone who'd spent decades in customer service while privately despising customers. "International wire transfer," Thornton said flatly. $45 fee. You're short $25. "I know." Miguel's voice cracked slightly. "I was hoping." "Hoping what?" Now Thornton looked up, and there was something in his eyes that Miguel recognized instantly. He'd seen it before, in different faces across different counters. "That we'd waive our fees? That I'd reach into my own pocket for you?" The lobby wasn't crowded. Tuesday mornings at 9:30 a.m. rarely were, but the 7 other people waiting suddenly became an audience. An elderly woman with a walker paused mid-step. A young couple filling out deposit slips stopped writing. Even Karen Morrison, the teller at window 3, went silent. Miguel felt heat rising up his neck. "I'm not asking for charity. I'm asking if there's any other way to send it. Some other service that... You want my advice?" Thornton leaned back in his chair, his voice rising just enough to ensure everyone could hear. "You want financial advice from a professional?" Miguel said nothing. His calloused hands gripped the edge of the counter. "Stop sending money to Mexico. You're in America now. Your mother is an adult. She should take care of herself." Thornton gestured dismissively toward the $20 bill. "And if you're so worried about her, maybe you should make better financial decisions. Learn to save, plan ahead, instead of showing up here expecting us to solve your problems." The silence that followed was suffocating. Miguel stared at the $20 bill, a portrait of Andrew Jackson, the 7th president, staring back at him with that stern, historical gaze. He thought about the 3 jobs he was working. The 4 a.m. starts laying foundation for the new medical center on Campbell Avenue. The lunch break spent power washing driveways for a cleaning company. The evenings at the warehouse, unloading shipping containers until his shoulders screamed. 70 hours a week for the past 5 months, ever since his mother's diabetes medication had doubled in price and the small tienda she ran was robbed. He'd been eating 1 meal a day to save money. This $20 was supposed to last him another week. "I work hard," Miguel said softly. "Harder than you know." Thornton snorted. "I'm sure you do, but hard work without intelligence is just wasted energy." He tapped his temple. "This is what matters. Financial literacy, understanding how money works, not just manual labor." Something shifted in the room. The elderly woman with the walker looked uncomfortable. The young couple exchanged glances. Even Karen Morrison, who'd worked at the bank for 11 years and never once contradicted her manager, looked down at her hands. Miguel reached for the $20 bill, his fingers trembling. Then he stopped. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the money. And when he looked up at Thornton, his dark eyes held something new, not anger, not shame, something quieter and more dangerous. "You're right," Miguel said. "Money should work smarter, not harder." Thornton smirked. "Glad we agree. Then let's make this interesting." Miguel pushed the $20 bill forward again. "You're a banker, a financial expert. You understand how money grows, how investments work, how to make smart decisions." "That's correct," Thornton said, his smirk widening. "Then I challenge you." Miguel's voice was steady now, clear. "We both start with $20. 1 month from today we meet back here. Whoever has more money wins. You can use all your financial knowledge, your connections, your expertise. I'll use my, what did you call it? Manual labor, wasted energy. The lobby had gone completely silent. Even the background hum of the ventilation system seemed to quiet. Thornton laughed, a short, barking sound. You're joking. I'm not. And when you win, because you will, right? You're the expert, you keep both amounts, all the money. But if somehow I have more... Miguel paused, choosing his words carefully. Then you wire whatever amount I've earned to my mother, no fees, and you apologize publicly, right here in this lobby. And if you lose, Thornton asked, then I apologize, publicly, for wasting your time and for not understanding how money works. Thornton leaned forward, his eyes narrowing. This man, this sunburned, calloused, exhausted immigrant worker, was challenging him, in his own bank, in front of witnesses. The presumption was almost insulting, almost, but it was also an opportunity. Double this money, Thornton said slowly, picking up Miguel's $20 bill and pulling out his own wallet. He extracted a crisp 20, laid it next to Miguel's worn one. You think you can beat me at making money? Me? I have an MBA from Wharton. I manage $17 million in assets. I've been in finance for 23 years. Then it should be easy, Miguel said. Something flickered across Thornton's face, pride, arrogance, and underneath it, the faintest whisper of uncertainty. But the audience was watching now. The elderly woman had pulled out her phone. The young couple was filming. This would be on social media within minutes. He couldn't back down. Fine, Thornton said. 1 month. We'll see who understands how the world really works. He extended his hand. Miguel shook it. Thornton's palm was soft, moisturized. Miguel's was rough, with fresh cuts from cutting wire earlier that morning. 1 month, Miguel repeated. Same time, right here. As Miguel turned to leave, he heard Thornton mutter to Karen Morrison, "This is going to be entertaining. Poor bastard probably thinks he can double $20 doing yard work." But Miguel heard it, and as he pushed through the glass doors into the harsh morning sun, he thought about his grandmother's words, spoken 23 years ago when he was just a boy in Guadalajara. Mijo, the difference between rich people and poor people isn't money, it's what they're willing to see. The challenge had been set. The clock was ticking, and for the first time in months, Miguel felt something other than exhaustion. He felt purpose. Miguel didn't sleep that night, not because of anxiety, though there was plenty of that. He lay in his small room, one of 4 he shared in a converted garage with 3 other workers, staring at the water-stained ceiling, thinking through every possible approach. The $40 sat on the small folding table beside his mattress, his 20 and Thornton's 20. In the darkness, they looked identical. At 3:45 a.m., he gave up on sleep and walked the 18 blocks to the construction site. The pre-dawn air was cool, almost cold, and Phoenix sprawled around him in that strange liminal space between night and morning. Streetlights hummed. A few early delivery trucks rumbled past. Somewhere, a rooster crowed despite the urban setting, probably from one of the backyard chicken coops that were becoming fashionable in the gentrifying neighborhoods. His supervisor, Tommy Garcia, was already there, setting up the scaffolding. Tommy was second generation, born in Phoenix to parents who'd crossed in the 80s. He'd given Miguel this job 6 months ago, no questions asked about documentation, paying him in cash every Friday. "You're early even for you," Tommy said, not looking up from the metal pipes he was connecting. "Couldn't sleep. Woman problems? Money problems?" Tommy laughed. "Same thing, usually." He tightened a bolt, testing the connection. What happened? Miguel told him about the bank, about Thornton, about the challenge. As he spoke, Tommy's hands slowed, then stopped. When Miguel finished, Tommy sat down on a concrete block, pulling off his work gloves. "You challenged a banker to make money," Tommy said slowly. with $20 in 1 month. Yes, Miguel, brother, I love you, but that's insane. This guy probably makes more in interest in 1 day than we make in a week. I know. So why'd you do it? Miguel was quiet for a moment. How could he explain the look on Thornton's face, the casual cruelty in his voice, the assumption that Miguel was stupid, lazy, inferior, all because he did physical work instead of sitting behind a desk? Because he needed to be challenged, Miguel finally said, and because I needed to prove something, maybe to him, maybe to myself. Tommy studied him in the growing light. Then, slowly, he smiled. All right, okay, I'm in. In what? Whatever you're planning. You're going to need help. You're going to need people. Tommy stood up, brushing dust from his jeans. And I know people. That's how it started. That morning, during their 7 a.m. break, Tommy made 3 phone calls. By lunch, those 3 had made 8 more. By evening, a plan was forming. The next day, Miguel went to see Father Gonzalez at St. Mary's Catholic Church. The priest had known Miguel for 4 years, ever since Miguel had started attending the 6 p.m. Spanish language Mass. Father Gonzalez was 73, with white hair and hands gnarled by arthritis, but his mind was sharp. You want to use the church parking lot, Father Gonzalez said after Miguel explained. For what exactly? A market, a small one. Just on Saturdays. We already have the food bank on Saturdays. This would be after, from noon to 6 p.m. Miguel pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket. I've been thinking about this. There are at least 40 families in our community who make things or grow things but have nowhere to sell them. Mrs. Herrera makes tamales. Carlos Ruiz builds furniture. The Guyan family grows vegetables in their backyard. Ana Torres does alterations and sewing. Father Gonzalez leaned back in his chair, the wood creaking. And you take a percentage? No, I take nothing. But I ask them to remember this when I need help. Miguel met the priest's eyes. I'm not trying to get rich, Father. I'm trying to prove that people like us, we have value. We can build something. That we're not just wasted energy. The priest was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. You have 1 month. If it works, we'll talk about longer. The first market happened that Saturday. 8 vendors showed up. Mrs. Herrera with her tamales, Carlos Ruiz with 3 small side tables he'd built from reclaimed wood, the Nguyen family with fresh bok choy, tomatoes and Thai basil. Ana Torres with a portable sewing machine, offering to hem pants while people waited. Miguel had spent the previous 3 days after work making flyers by hand, posting them in every laundromat, grocery store and community center within 2 miles. He'd called the local Spanish-language radio station and convinced them to announce it for free. He'd knocked on doors, talked to neighbors, used every connection he had. 43 people came that first Saturday. They bought $217 worth of goods. Miguel didn't touch any of it. But he watched. He learned. He saw which items sold, which didn't. He talked to every customer, asking what else they'd like to see. He noticed that people stayed longer than they needed to, that they talked to each other, that something was forming here beyond just transactions. On Sunday, he approached each vendor individually with a proposal. If they agreed to donate 10% of their profits to a community fund, he would use that money to promote the market more widely, bring in more customers, make it better for everyone. All 8 agreed. The second Saturday, there were 13 vendors, 76 customers, $492 in sales. The community fund had $49, $20. The third Saturday, 18 vendors, 112 customers, $781 in sales. The community fund had $78, 10 plus the previous week's 49s, $20. Miguel was working 20 hours a day now. His 3 jobs during the week, the market on Saturdays, and every other spare moment spent planning, organizing, solving problems. He'd lost 12 pounds. His eyes had dark circles, but something was happening that he couldn't quite name yet. Meanwhile, Richard Thornton was having a very different month. He'd told his wife Elizabeth about the challenge that first night over dinner. They sat in their dining room, 8 chairs around a mahogany table, though it was just the two of them, eating salmon that their meal prep service had delivered. "You challenged a construction worker to make money," Elizabeth said, her voice carefully neutral. "He challenged me," Thornton corrected. "I accepted. With $20. It's the principle. These people need to understand their place, understand that success isn't luck or privilege. It's knowledge, education, smart decisions." Elizabeth cut her salmon into precise pieces. "And how are you planning to double your $20? Thornton smiled. "I've already made 5 calls. I'm putting it into a micro-investment portfolio, high-yield bonds. I should see 8 to 12% return easily. In 1 month, I'll have at least $22, probably 23. He'll be lucky to have 15 after he spends it on beer or whatever." But the high-yield bonds required a minimum investment of $500. When Thornton called his investment broker, Jerry Peterson, Jerry laughed. "$20? Richard, what am I supposed to do with $20? The transaction fees alone would eat half of it. Then forget fees, person to person. You invest it, we split any profit 50-50. Jerry was quiet for a moment. "Is this some kind of bet?" "Yes. I'm not investing $20. Call me when you have a real sum." Thornton tried 4 more brokers. All said variations of the same thing. His money, his knowledge, his connections, his expertise was built for large numbers. The system didn't work at $20. He considered day trading, but realized he'd need to explain to Elizabeth why he was spending his evenings gambling their savings. He thought about flipping items online, but found the idea of photographing and shipping used goods humiliating. He was Richard Thornton. He didn't hawk second-hand items like some desperate eBay merchant. In the end, he put the $20 in a high-yield savings account at his own bank. 5% annual interest. In 30 days, he'd earn exactly 8 cents. $20.08. He told himself it didn't matter. The immigrant would show up with nothing or not show up at all. The whole thing would be forgotten. But at night, lying in bed, he kept thinking about the look in Miguel's eyes. Not anger, not desperation, something else. Something that made Thornton vaguely uncomfortable, though he couldn't say why. On the 4th Saturday, there were 23 vendors at the market, 149 customers. People were coming from neighboring areas now. The community fund had $187, 43 total, but more importantly, something else was happening. People were trading skills. The carpenter built a display shelf for the woman who sold jewelry, and she gave him a handmade bracelet for his daughter. The Tamale lady taught the Nigerian family how to make Mexican food, and they taught her how to make jollof rice. The photographer took free family portraits in exchange for homemade bread. An economy was forming, not based on individual profit, but on collective value. And Miguel was at the center of it, not as a boss or an owner, but as a connector. He introduced people. He solved problems. He worked harder than anyone, but he never asked for payment. He was building something, though even he didn't fully understand what yet. One evening, Tommy pulled him aside. "You know people are starting to call you the mayor, right? That's ridiculous. I'm not in charge of anything. That's exactly why they're calling you that. You're not trying to be in charge. You're just trying to help." Tommy squeezed his shoulder. "But Miguel, you need to think about the endgame here. 3 weeks from now, you're going to stand in that bank. You need to have more money than a professional banker. How are you going to do that?" Miguel looked out at the market. The sun was setting, casting long shadows across the church parking lot. People were packing up, still talking, still laughing. Mrs. Herrera was teaching someone's grandmother her tamale recipe. Carlos Ruiz was measuring someone's hallway for a custom bookshelf. "I'm not trying to beat him at making money, Miguel said quietly. I'm trying to beat him at understanding what money is for. Tommy looked at him for a long moment. That's either brilliant or completely insane. Maybe both. With 1 week left, Miguel made the hardest decision. He took the entire community fund, $312, 76, and divided it equally among all 23 vendors as investment capital. He told them to use it however they thought would help their businesses grow. Buy materials, invest in equipment, whatever they needed. They looked at him like he was crazy, but they trusted him. They took the money. Miguel was back to zero. Worse than zero. He'd spent his own money on flyers, on gas, on supplies. He had less than he'd started with. Tommy was furious. What were you thinking? You had $300. You could have claimed victory. I wasn't thinking about victory, Miguel said. I was thinking about what comes after. After what? After the challenge ends. After the 30 days. What happens to all these people, this market? If I take that money and win, then what? Everything stops. Everyone goes back to how things were. Miguel shook his head. That's not why I did this. Then why did you do this? Miguel didn't answer. He wasn't entirely sure himself. With 3 days left, Richard Thornton was feeling confident. His $20 had earned exactly 24 cents in interest. He'd moved it to a slightly better account, $20.24. Not impressive, but definitely positive growth. More importantly, he'd heard nothing about Miguel Reyes. No social media updates, no viral videos. The construction worker had clearly realized his mistake and would either not show up or arrive with empty hands and excuses. Thornton had already prepared his acceptance speech, gracious but firm, teaching without condescending, making it clear that while he bore no ill will, this had been an important lesson in understanding economic realities. Then Karen Morrison knocked on his office door. "Sir, I think you should see this." She showed him her phone, a local news article from the Phoenix Herald's community section. Grassroots market transforms West Phoenix neighborhood. The photos showed the church parking lot filled with people, vendors, families. And there, in the background of one image, was Miguel Reyes. Thornton read the article, his jaw tightening. The market had raised over $3,000 in 4 weeks. It had created connections between vendors and retailers. Several small businesses had emerged from it. The neighborhood was already planning to expand it, possibly making it permanent. "This doesn't mean anything," Thornton said, handing the phone back. "He doesn't own that market. He didn't make that money. This is community organizing, not business." "I know, sir," Karen said quietly. "I just thought you should be aware." After she left, Thornton sat at his desk, staring at his computer screen without seeing it. Something felt wrong. He'd been in banking for 23 years. He understood money, how it moved, how it grew, how it created power, this market thing, and it was charity dressed up as entrepreneurship, feel-good nonsense that would collapse the moment reality set in. But then why did he feel uneasy? That night, he drove past St. Mary's Church. It was Tuesday, not a market day, but there were still people there. A small crowd gathered around the community garden that apparently had been started using market funds. He saw Miguel among them, bent over with a shovel, digging in dirt that wouldn't profit him a single cent. Thornton drove home and poured himself 3 fingers of bourbon. Elizabeth found him in his study an hour later, staring at nothing. "What's wrong?" she asked. "I'm going to win," he said. "Obviously. The man has no financial education, no strategy, no understanding of capital investment." "Then why do you look worried?" He couldn't answer that. Miguel, meanwhile, was facing his own crisis. With 2 days left, the 23 vendors gathered at the church. Father Gonzalez had given them use of the fellowship hall. Mrs. Herrera stood up first. She was 63, with grey hair and hands permanently curved from decades of forming masa. "Miguel, we need to talk about this challenge, about what happens Thursday morning." I know, Miguel said. I'm going to lose. The room erupted, everyone talking at once. No, they said, no. He'd built something incredible. He'd changed their lives. He couldn't lose. Carlos Ruiz stood up, waving his hands for quiet. Listen, we've talked about this among ourselves. We want to give you our profits, all of us, everything we've made because of this market. You've earned it. The others nodded, murmuring agreement. Miguel felt something break inside his chest. I can't accept that, he said. Why not? Ana Torres asked. You've worked harder than anyone. You've slept maybe 3 hours a night for a month. You've spent your own money, your own time. You deserve this. I didn't do this to deserve anything, Miguel said. His voice was rough. I did this because that banker made me angry. Because he looked at me like I was nothing, like all of us are nothing, and I wanted to prove him wrong. So let us help you prove it, Mrs. Herrera said gently. But if I take your money, then he was right. Then I'm just using you, exploiting you, making profit off other people's work. Miguel looked around the room at their faces. Don't you see? That's what he does. That's what his whole world is built on. Making money from other people's labor, other people's desperation. I won't become him to beat him. Silence filled the hall. Father Gonzalez, who'd been sitting quietly in the back, stood up. There's another way, the priest said. Miguel, how much money do you have right now? Your original $20? I spent it, Miguel admitted, on flyers, on supplies. I have about $11 left. And Mr. Thornton has his $20 plus whatever small interest he's earned, so he'll win the challenge based on the terms you set. Father Gonzalez walked to the front of the room. But what if winning isn't about who has more money? What if it's about who understands what money is for? I don't understand, Miguel said. Thursday morning, you go to that bank. You tell everyone what you did. Not how much money you made, but what you built. Show them the vendors. Show them the community. Show them that value isn't just dollars. It's connection. It's dignity. It's people helping each other rise. The priest smiled. You won't win their challenge, but you'll show them their challenge was meaningless. Tommy shook his head. Father, with respect, that's just words. That banker will laugh in his face. He'll take it as confirmation that Miguel failed. Maybe, Father Gonzalez said, or maybe people will see clearly for the first time what kind of man each of them really is. The room debated for 2 more hours. Some agreed with Father Gonzalez. Others insisted Miguel should take their collective profits, which totaled over $600 now, and claim a clear mathematical victory. A few suggested cancelling the whole thing, just not showing up. Miguel listened to all of it, and slowly, quietly, an idea formed. The next morning, Wednesday, he did something crazy. He took his remaining $11 and bought business cards. Simple ones, printed at the office supply store. They read, Miguel Reyes, community connector with his phone number. Then he spent the entire day, no work, no sleep, going to every vendor, every customer, every person who'd been part of the market. He told them about the challenge. He told them the truth. He was going to lose mathematically, but he asked them each for one thing. Show up, he said. Thursday morning, 9:30 a.m. at First National Bank. Just be there. You don't have to say anything. You don't have to do anything. Just be there. By Wednesday evening, he'd talked to 117 people. 43 said they'd come. That night, Miguel couldn't sleep again, but this time, it wasn't anxiety. It was something else. A strange calm. He'd done everything he could. He'd worked harder than he'd ever worked. He'd built something real, and whether or not he won the challenge tomorrow, that couldn't be taken away. At 3 a.m., he got up and walked to the construction site. He sat on a concrete block and watched the stars fade as Phoenix woke up around him. His hands hurt, his back hurt, his entire body was exhausted. But for the first time in months, maybe years, he felt like himself, like he mattered, like his work mattered. At 6 a.m., Tommy found him there. You ready? Tommy asked. No, Miguel said honestly. But I'm going anyway. They arrived at First National Bank at 9:15 a.m. The parking lot was already full. Miguel's breath caught. They'd come. The vendors, the customers, people he'd helped and people who'd helped him. They stood in the parking lot, quiet, waiting. Mrs. Herrera with her 3 daughters, Carlos Ruiz with his 2 sons, Ana Torres holding hands with her husband, the Nguyen family, all 5 of them. Father Gonzalez in his clerical collar and others, people Miguel didn't recognize, neighbors, friends of friends, the local news crew that had written about the market. Over 80 people standing in the morning sun, waiting. Tommy gripped Miguel's shoulder. Whatever happens in there, you already won. At 9:28 a.m., Miguel walked through the glass doors of First National Bank. The crowd followed him. They filled the lobby until there was no more room, and then they waited outside, pressed against the windows. Karen Morrison stood at her teller window, eyes wide. The branch security guard looked panicked, but did nothing. These people weren't threatening, just present, and at 9:30 a.m. exactly, Richard Thornton emerged from his office, holding a small envelope. He stopped when he saw the crowd. His face went pale, then red. "What is this?" he demanded. "Witnesses," Miguel said quietly. "You wanted to teach me a lesson, in public, so I brought the public." Thornton's hands were shaking slightly, but he walked to the same counter where this had started exactly 1 month ago. Miguel followed. They faced each other across the marble surface. The entire bank was silent. Richard Thornton opened his envelope with careful precision, as if the simple act of maintaining control over paper and fingers could somehow restore his control over the situation. He removed a withdrawal slip showing his account balance, the original $20 plus 1 month of interest, $20.37. He set it on the counter with a small, tight smile that didn't reach his eyes. Then he turned to face Miguel and the crowd that filled every available space in the lobby. His voice was steady, professional, the same tone he'd used for 23 years to explain why loan applications were denied or why fees couldn't be waived. "The terms of our challenge were simple," Thornton said. "Who could grow $20 more effectively in 30 days? I have $20.37, a modest but guaranteed return." He looked at Miguel. "Now, show us what you have." Miguel reached into his pocket slowly. The crowd leaned forward, even those pressed against the outside windows, straining to see. He pulled out a worn leather wallet, the same one he'd carried since crossing the border 8 years ago, and from it removed 4 bills, 3 singles and a 5, $8. Thornton's smile broadened. Behind him, Karen Morrison closed her eyes. Outside, someone in the crowd made a small sound of distress. Even Father Gonzalez looked concerned. $8, Thornton announced, making sure his voice carried. "Not only did you fail to grow your money, you lost 60% of it. This is exactly what I told you would happen. Hard work without financial intelligence is wasted effort. You spent a month proving my point." Miguel didn't argue. He simply nodded, setting the $8 beside Thornton's 20. "You're right," Miguel said quietly. "I have less money than you. By your measure, I lost. Not by my measure, by objective reality, by mathematics." Thornton picked up both amounts, his and Miguel's, holding them up for everyone to see. "This is what separates success from failure. This is what separates those who understand how the world works from those who—" "May I say something?" Miguel interrupted. Thornton paused, irritated but curious. "Of course, though I'm not sure what there is to say. The numbers are clear." Miguel turned to face the crowd. 87 people packed into and around the bank lobby, faces he knew and faces he didn't. He saw Mrs. Herrera crying quietly. He saw Tommy looking furious. He saw Ana Torres holding her husband tighter. "4 weeks ago," Miguel began, I stood exactly here with $20. My mother in Mexico hadn't eaten in 2 days. I was exhausted, working 70 hours a week, and I'd just been told that I was. What were your words, Mr. Thornton? I don't recall the exact... You said my hard work was wasted energy. You said I should make better financial decisions. You said my mother should take care of herself. Miguel's voice remained calm, almost gentle. And you were right about one thing. I needed to make better decisions. Not about money, about what money is for. He gestured to the crowd. So I took that $20 and I spent it. I bought flyers and supplies. I talked to Father Gonzalez about using the church parking lot. I spent every free hour for 4 weeks organizing a market where people like us, people who work with their hands, who speak with accents, who don't have MBAs from Wharton, could sell what they make and grow. A nice story, Thornton said. But charity isn't business. Community organizing isn't finance. You still have $8. I still have 20. The math doesn't lie. You're right. Math doesn't lie, so let's talk about the real math. Miguel pulled a folded piece of paper from his other pocket, the one with the business cards. Mrs. Herrera, could you come forward? The elderly woman with gray hair moved through the crowd. She stood beside Miguel, hands trembling. Mrs. Herrera makes tamales, Miguel said. Before the market, she sold maybe 2 dozen a week to neighbors, making about $40 a month. How much did you make from the market in 4 weeks, Mrs. Herrera? She spoke in accented English, her voice soft but clear. $733. A ripple went through the crowd. Carlos Ruiz, Miguel called. The carpenter. You build furniture from reclaimed wood. How much before the market? Carlos stepped forward. Maybe 1 piece a month. $200 if I was lucky. From the market, 12 pieces sold. $2,100. Ana Torres, seamstress. How much? $580 from the market. I've been hired by 2 boutiques now for regular work. Before, I was making maybe $100 a month. One by one, Miguel called them forward. The Nguyen family with their vegetables. The photographer, the jewelry maker, the baker. The man who repaired electronics, the woman who taught music lessons. Each one shared their numbers, what they'd made, how their lives had changed. Thornton's smile had vanished. This is irrelevant. The challenge was about you and me, not them. Was it? Miguel asked. You're a banker. You manage $17 million in assets. That's what you told me. But that's not your money, is it? It's other people's money. You make profit from managing it, from taking a percentage, from fees and interest and investments made with capital that isn't yours. That's how banking works, Thornton said defensively. That's what financial institutions do. Exactly. Miguel looked directly at him. You create value by connecting money with opportunity, by taking capital from people who have it and lending it to people who need it. That's your whole business model. Except when someone like me walks in with $20. Suddenly that model doesn't work. $20 isn't enough for your system. The fees cost more than the money. So you told me it was my fault, my lack of understanding, my wasted energy. The crowd was absolutely silent now. Even the street noise outside seemed to fade. I took that same $20, Miguel continued, and I did exactly what you do. I connected people with opportunity. Mrs. Herrera had amazing tamales, but no customers. Customers wanted tamales, but didn't know where to find them. I connected them. Carlos had furniture, but no market. I created one. I did what you do, but without keeping the profit for myself. And in 30 days, the people here, 43 vendors, created over $17,000 in sales. He let that number hang in the air. I took $20 and created a system that generated $17,000 in 1 month. You took $20 and generated 37 cents. So tell me, Mr. Thornton, who understands how money works? Thornton's face had gone from red to white. You can't claim their success as yours. You didn't make that money. They did. You're right. They did. Because I helped them, I connected them, I organized them. I worked 70-hour weeks, plus every spare moment to make it happen, and I asked for nothing in return. Miguel picked up his $8 from the counter. This is what I have left after spending everything on making it work. I'm poorer now than when I started. Then you lost! Thornton's voice cracked slightly. You just admitted it. I lost the challenge, Miguel agreed, but I gained something else. I gained a community. I gained respect. I gained proof that my work, manual labor, wasted energy, has value. That I have value. Mrs. Herrera stepped forward then, pulling an envelope from her purse. Miguel won't take our money. We tried to give him everything we earned. He refused. So instead, we did something else. She handed the envelope to Father Gonzalez, who opened it and began to read aloud, "To whom it may concern, we, the undersigned, wish to establish a community fund to be managed by Miguel Reyes for the purpose of supporting small vendors and families in West Phoenix. The initial capital is $2, $347, contributed by 43 local vendors as a way of honoring his work and ensuring this market continues." The priest continued reading, but Miguel wasn't listening. He was watching Thornton's face as the banker finally understood. It wasn't about who had more money in their pocket. It was about who had created more value, about whose $20 had changed more lives. Karen Morrison started clapping first, slowly, tentatively from her teller window. Then Tommy joined in, then Mrs. Herrera, then the whole crowd. The sound building until it echoed through the marble lobby. Thornton stood frozen, holding his $20.37. "I believe," Father Gonzalez said, still holding the document, "that the terms included an apology. In public." For a long moment Thornton said nothing. His jaw worked silently, his hands clenched and unclenched. Miguel could see the calculation happening behind his eyes, the cost-benefit analysis of admitting error versus protecting pride. Finally, in a voice barely above a whisper, Thornton said, "I apologize." "For what?" Miguel asked, not cruelly, genuinely wanting to know. Thornton closed his eyes. When he opened them, something had shifted. Not much, but something. For assuming your work had no value, for not seeing the person in front of me, for measuring you by numbers instead of... He trailed off, unable to finish. "Instead of impact," Miguel said quietly, "instead of dignity, instead of what money can build when it's used to lift people up, instead of keeping them down." He extended his hand. Thornton stared at it for several seconds. Then slowly, he shook it. The crowd began to disperse. People filed out of the bank, talking excitedly, making plans for the next market. Carlos Ruiz was already discussing expanding the space. Ana Torres was exchanging contact information with a woman who wanted sewing lessons. The Nguyen family was planning what vegetables to plant for next month. Miguel stayed behind, standing at the counter. Karen Morrison approached him, hesitantly. "I've never seen anything like that," she said. "I didn't mean to embarrass anyone," Miguel said. "I just needed to prove something, maybe to myself most of all." "You did," she said. "You proved it." As Miguel walked toward the exit, Thornton called out, "Wait!" Miguel turned. The banker was still standing at the counter, holding the $8 Miguel had left behind. "This is yours," Thornton said. "Keep it for the wire transfer fee next time someone like me comes in, so they don't have to choose between eating and helping their family." Thornton looked at the money in his hand for a long moment. Then he nodded. Outside, the morning had turned bright and hot. Phoenix sun, relentless and uncompromising. Miguel walked to where Tommy was waiting. "You did it," Tommy said. "You crazy bastard. You actually did it." "I lost the challenge," Miguel pointed out. "No, you didn't. You changed the game. That's better than winning." They walked together toward Tommy's truck. Miguel's phone buzzed, a text from his mother in Guadalajara. "Mijo, a wire transfer just came through, $200, from First National Bank." "What is this?" Miguel stopped walking. He looked back at the bank. Through the glass doors, he could see Thornton at his desk, head in his hands. Maybe the man had learned something after all. 3 months later, the market had expanded to 2 days a week. 63 vendors now participated. The community fund had grown to over $8,000, and they'd started offering microloans to help people start small businesses. No interest, just pay it back when you can. Miguel had quit 2 of his 3 jobs. He now worked construction during the day and managed the market in the evenings and weekends. He wasn't getting rich, but he was getting by. More importantly, he was building something that would outlast him. Father Gonzalez had invited him to speak at other churches, other communities. The model was spreading. 3 similar markets had started in other Phoenix neighborhoods, one in Tucson, another in Tempe. And late one Tuesday evening, as Miguel was closing up the market, a familiar car pulled into the parking lot. Richard Thornton stepped out, wearing jeans instead of his usual suit. "I heard you could use volunteers," Thornton said. "People to help with setup, organization." Miguel studied him carefully. "Why?" "Because I spent 23 years believing I understood value, and you showed me I didn't know anything." Thornton shifted uncomfortably. "I'm not asking for forgiveness, I'm just asking to help, if you'll have me." Miguel thought about that moment a month ago, the humiliation and anger. He thought about how easy it would be to turn this man away, to make him feel the rejection Miguel had felt. Instead, he said, "Market sets up at 7 a.m. on Saturdays. We could use help with the tables." Thornton nodded. "I'll be here." And he was, every Saturday for the next 6 months, carrying tables, hauling supplies, rarely speaking, just working, learning what manual labor actually felt like. One day, as they were breaking down tables together, Thornton said, "I told my wife I'm quitting the bank, going to work with a non-profit that does microfinancing for immigrant communities." Miguel looked up, surprised. "That's a big change. I've been in the wrong job for 23 years. Took me this long to figure it out." Thornton picked up a folding chair. "I'll make maybe a third of what I made before. Elizabeth says it's the first time she's seen me excited about work in a decade." "What changed your mind?" Thornton was quiet for a moment. "That day in the bank, when you counted up all the money those vendors made, $17,000, and I kept thinking, if I'd actually tried to help you instead of judging you, imagine what we could have built together. I spent my whole career managing $17 million for wealthy people. You created more impact with 20. It wasn't me. It was all of us. That's exactly my point. I never understood that. I thought success was individual, competitive, that there were winners and losers, and my job was to make sure I was a winner." He shook his head. "But you showed me a different model, where everyone wins, where value multiplies instead of concentrating." They finished breaking down the last table in silence. The sun was setting, painting the parking lot gold and amber. Vendors were packing up, calling goodbyes to each other. Mrs. Herrera's daughter was teaching someone how to fold tamales. Carlos Ruiz was sketching a design for someone's custom furniture order. "I'm still paying off my mother's medical bills," Miguel said. "Still working construction, still barely getting by financially. But you're rich in the ways that matter," Thornton said. Miguel smiled. "That sounds like something a rich person says when they're trying to feel better about inequality." Thornton laughed, a real laugh this time, not the practiced banker's chuckle. "Fair point, but I'm serious. You have something I spent 23 years looking for and never found. What's that? Purpose, community, the feeling that your work matters." Thornton picked up his keys. "I had money, Miguel, a lot of it, and I was miserable. You had $8 and you were free." After Thornton left, Miguel sat on the church steps. Father Gonzalez came out, locking the parish hall. "That was interesting," the priest said, sitting beside him. "The banker helping out." "He's trying," Miguel said. That's more than I expected. You know what you did, don't you? Father Gonzalez asked. Not with the market, but with him. You showed him mercy. You could have destroyed him that day, humiliated him completely. Instead, you gave him a chance to grow. He humiliated himself. I just showed up. You showed up with 87 people who believed in you. You showed up with proof that dignity and work and community have value that can't be measured in dollars. The priest stood slowly, his knees creaking. That's not a small thing, Miguel. That's revolutionary. Revolutionary. The word felt too big. Miguel was just a construction worker who'd gotten angry and done something impulsive. But as he looked around the parking lot, at the empty vendor spaces that would fill again next Saturday, at the garden growing in the corner, at the hand-painted sign someone had made reading "Community First Market," he wondered if maybe the priest was right. Not revolutionary in the loud, violent sense, but in the quiet sense of changing what was possible, of showing that another way existed. He thought about his mother in Guadalajara, who now received $200 every month, wire transfers from Thornton's bank, no fees, a standing order that the banker himself had set up. He thought about the 63 vendors who'd found dignity and income. He thought about the microloans, helping people start businesses. He thought about the model spreading to other communities. Maybe you didn't have to change everything to change something. Maybe revolution was just 1,000 small acts of choosing people over profit, community over competition, dignity over dollars. His phone buzzed. A text from Tommy. New vendor wants in. She makes pupusas, adding her to the list. Miguel typed back, yes, give her a good spot. Let's see what she builds. The sun finished setting. The parking lot went dark except for the single streetlight at the corner. Miguel stood, brushing dust from his jeans. Tomorrow he'd be up at 4 a.m. for construction, then the market, then planning meetings for the expansion, 70-hour weeks, tired hands, $8 in his pocket. And somehow, impossibly, it was enough. More than enough. It was everything. The envelope arrived on a Tuesday morning, addressed simply to Miguel Reyes, Community First Market. Inside was a handwritten letter on expensive stationery and a check for $5,000. Miguel sat in the small office they'd created in the corner of the church fellowship hall, donated desk, second-hand computer, walls covered with vendor schedules and community photos, and read the letter twice before he believed it. Dear Mr. Reyes, my name is Sandra Chen. I'm a reporter for the Arizona Republic, and I've been following the story of Community First Market since that day at First National Bank last year. The video went viral, as you probably know, 12 million views and counting. But what interested me more than the confrontation was what happened after. I've spent the past 6 months documenting the ripple effects of your model. 347 vendors across 7 markets in 4 Arizona cities, over $2. $3 million in cumulative sales, 43 new small businesses formally registered. But the numbers don't tell the full story. I interviewed Maria Santos, who started selling her mother's Puerto Rican recipes at your market and now owns a food truck that employs 6 people. I talked to David Kim, whose photography business emerged from offering free portraits at the market. He now shoots for major magazines. I spoke with the Hernandez family, whose backyard garden produce led to a contract supplying 3 local restaurants. The enclosed check is from the Kaufman Foundation for Social Innovation. They've been watching your work. They want to fund a pilot program to replicate your model in 10 cities nationwide. No strings attached, no control given up, just resources to scale what you've proven works. I know you'll probably want to refuse this money, just like you've refused every other offer. But Miguel, people need to see what's possible. They need to know that another way exists. Please consider it. Respectfully, Sandra Chen Miguel set the letter down and stared at the check. $5,000. No, he realized, reading more carefully, $5,000 per month for 2 years, $120,000 total. His hands were shaking. Tommy knocked on the office doorframe. "You okay? You look like you've seen a ghost." Miguel handed him the letter. Tommy read it, his eyes widening. "Holy shit," Tommy breathed. "Miguel, this is huge. This could change everything." "That's what I'm afraid of." Tommy looked up from the letter. "What do you mean? Money changes things. It changed Thornton. It changes everyone." Miguel stood, pacing the small office. "Right now, the market works because people believe in it, because we're all struggling together, building together. What happens when there's $100,000 involved? When people start fighting over who gets what? When vendors think I'm making decisions based on money instead of community?" "Or," Tommy said carefully, "what happens if you keep saying no to every opportunity? What happens to all those people who could benefit from markets in their cities? What happens to Maria Santos in Albuquerque, who's making tamales in her kitchen, who could have a platform like this but doesn't because you're too scared to scale?" Miguel stopped pacing. Tommy was right and he knew it, but accepting this money felt like stepping onto a path he couldn't see the end of. "Can I think about it?" Miguel asked. "Of course, but Miguel, don't take too long. Opportunities like this don't wait forever." That evening, Miguel called his mother in Guadalajara. The connection was scratchy, her voice fading in and out, but hearing her was enough. "Mijo, you sound troubled," she said, after they'd exchanged pleasantries. "What's wrong?" He told her everything, about the letter, the money, the chance to expand, about his fear of losing what made the market special. His mother was quiet for a long moment. Then she laughed, a sound that made him smile despite his worry. "You remember when you were 7, she asked, "when your father died, and I had to decide whether to keep the tienda open or sell it?" "I remember. Everyone told me to sell. Take the money, they said, use it to survive. But I kept it open. You know why? Because it was Papa's dream. No, mijo, because it was the neighborhood's heart. People came there not just to buy things, but to talk, to connect, to help each other. If I'd sold it, that would have died. So I kept it open, even when it barely made money, even when it would have been smarter to walk away." Miguel closed his eyes. He knew where this was going. "But then I got older," his mother continued. "My diabetes got worse, and I realized that sometimes keeping something small and pure isn't enough. Sometimes you have to let it grow, even if growth brings risk, because if you don't, it dies anyway, just slowly, from your own limitations. What if the money corrupts it? Then you fight to keep it pure. But Miguel, you've already proven you can't be bought. You had $600 in your hands, and you gave it away. The Kaufman Foundation knows this. Sandra Chen knows this. That's why they're offering you the money, because you're the one person they trust not to waste it." After they hung up, Miguel sat in the darkness of his small room. Through the thin walls, he could hear his roommates, Jose watching soccer, Antonio on the phone with his girlfriend in Honduras, Rafael snoring already despite it being only 8 p.m. He thought about Maria Santos in Albuquerque, about David Kim and his photography business, about the Hernandez family, about the hundreds of people who'd found something at the market, not just income, but purpose, community, dignity. And he thought about the thousands more who might find the same thing if he said yes. At midnight, he sent an email to Sandra Chen. "I'd like to meet with the foundation, but I have conditions. May just the meeting happened 2 weeks later at a coffee shop in downtown Phoenix. Miguel arrived in his work clothes. He'd come straight from the construction site, cement dust still on his boots. The foundation representatives looked exactly like he'd expected. Expensive suits, leather portfolios, the confident air of people who controlled significant capital. But Sandra Chen had been right about one thing: they'd done their homework. "Mr. Reyes," said the older woman who introduced herself as Patricia Kaufman, founder of the foundation. "We've been watching your work for months. What you've built is remarkable." "It's not just me," Miguel said automatically. "It's the community, the vendors, Father Gonzalez, Tommy, everyone." "We understand that," said the younger man, James Okoye, the foundation's program director. "That's precisely why we're interested. Most social enterprises fail because they're built around one person's ego or vision. Yours is built around collective success. That's scalable in a way individual brilliance isn't." Miguel pulled out a folded piece of paper from his pocket. He'd stayed up until 3 a.m. writing this, crossing out, rewriting. "I have conditions," he said. Patricia smiled. "We expected you would. First, no vendor ever pays me or the foundation directly. The 10% community contribution stays voluntary. Second, every market must be managed by someone from that community, not an outside administrator. Third, all funding decisions for each market are made collectively by vendors, not by me or the foundation. Fourth, if at any point this becomes about profit instead of people, I walk away and you shut it down." He set the paper on the table. His hands weren't shaking anymore. "That's it?" James asked. "That's it." Patricia and James exchanged glances. Then Patricia pulled out her own document, a contract, Miguel realized. She turned to the last page and pointed to a paragraph. "Section 7, subsection C," she said. "Already in there, all 4 conditions, plus a 5th one we added. You retain full veto power over any foundation decision regarding the markets. We provide resources and support. You provide vision and values. We never override you." Miguel stared at the contract. "You already agreed to this." "Mr. Reyes," Patricia said gently, "we're not trying to buy your market or control your mission. We're trying to fund it. There's a difference. Too many foundations think money gives them wisdom. We've learned that wisdom usually lives in the communities we serve. Our job is to resource it, not direct it." "Why?" Miguel asked. "Why do you care so much?" Patricia was quiet for a moment. Then she said, 20 years ago, I was a banker, not unlike Mr. Thornton, actually. I made a lot of money, thought I understood how the world worked. Then I visited a microcredit program in Bangladesh, women borrowing $10 to start businesses, lifting entire villages out of poverty, and I realized everything I'd been taught about finance was wrong. She picked up her coffee, her hands elegant and aged. "The financial system isn't designed to serve people like you, Mr. Reyes. It's designed to serve people like me, people who already have capital, connections, education. What you've built challenges that system. It proves that community and dignity and collective success can generate real economic value. That's not just beautiful. It's dangerous to the status quo. And that's exactly why it needs to scale." Miguel looked at Sandra Chen, who'd been silent during the exchange. She nodded slightly. "One more question," Miguel said. "What happens if I fail? What happens if I take this money and the markets collapse? If the model doesn't work in other cities, if people fight over resources, or it becomes corrupt, or it just falls apart?" James leaned forward. "Then we learn from the failure. We document what didn't work. We try again differently. But Mr. Reyes, you're not going to fail. You know how I know." "How?" "Because you're asking that question. The people who fail are the ones who think they can't. You're scared of failing, which means you'll work impossibly hard not to. And more importantly, you're not doing this alone. You have 73 vendors who believe in you. You have Father Gonzalez and Tommy and Mrs. Herrera. You have entire communities watching and learning. That's not a recipe for failure. That's a recipe for transformation." Miguel signed the contract that afternoon. His signature looked small and uncertain next to the printed text, but it was there. 6 months into the expansion, Miguel realized scaling success was infinitely harder than creating it. The market in Tucson was thriving. 42 vendors, weekend traffic in the hundreds, already generating interest from local businesses. The Phoenix markets had expanded to 5 locations across the city, but Albuquerque was struggling. Vendors were fighting over prime spots. Someone had accused the market coordinator of favoritism. 2 vendors had quit, claiming the whole thing was a scam. Miguel drove 8 hours to Albuquerque on a Friday night, arriving at 11 p.m. He met with the coordinator, Rosa Martinez, in a 24-hour diner. She looked exhausted, dark circles under her eyes that reminded him of his own face 6 months ago. "I can't do this anymore," Rosa said, her voice breaking. "I thought I understood what you did. I thought it was just about organization and fairness. But it's so much more than that. It's about being a therapist and a mediator and a visionary all at once. I'm not you, Miguel. I can't be you." "You're not supposed to be me," Miguel said gently. "Tell me what's really happening." The story came out in fragments. Rosa had tried to implement everything exactly as Miguel had done: the 10% voluntary contribution, the collective decision-making, the emphasis on community over profit. But Albuquerque wasn't Phoenix. The community was different. The vendors had different needs, different conflicts, different dynamics. "There's this one vendor, Eduardo," Rosa explained. "He sells jewelry, beautiful stuff, really talented. But he thinks because he makes the most money, he should have the best spot, the most say in decisions. And some vendors agree with him. They think success should be rewarded. But others say that goes against everything the market stands for." Miguel listened, feeling a familiar weight settle on his shoulders. This was the question he'd been avoiding. What happened when the values of the market conflicted with human nature? When people's desire for individual success clashed with collective good? "What do you think?" he asked Rosa. "I don't know. Part of me thinks Eduardo's right. If someone's business is growing, shouldn't we help it grow more? But another part thinks that's exactly how inequality starts, how we end up recreating the same systems we're trying to escape." Miguel thought about Richard Thornton, about the banker's surprise when Miguel had refused the vendor's money, about the fundamental tension between individual success and community benefit. "Can I meet Eduardo?" Miguel asked. The next morning, Miguel sat across from Eduardo Salazar in the market parking lot. Eduardo was younger than Miguel expected, maybe 30, with careful eyes and hands stained with silver polish. His jewelry was displayed on a table made from reclaimed wood, each piece tagged with prices that made Miguel wince. $70 for a bracelet, $150 for a necklace. "You're the famous Miguel Reyes," Eduardo said, not standing up. "Come to tell me I'm wrong." "I came to understand," Miguel said. "Rosa tells me you're frustrated with how the market operates." "Frustrated is an understatement. Look, I respect what you built in Phoenix. I do. But this model doesn't scale. It works when everyone's struggling equally, when we're all at the same level. But what happens when someone succeeds? When someone's business grows and they need more space, more resources, more support, the market penalizes success. It keeps everyone mediocre. Or it prevents hierarchy, Miguel countered. It prevents some people from becoming more important than others. "And what's wrong with hierarchy if it's earned?" Eduardo leaned forward. "I work 16-hour days perfecting my craft. I've taken classes, studied design, invested in quality materials. I make better jewelry than anyone else here, and I charge prices that reflect that quality. Why shouldn't I get the best corner spot? Why shouldn't my voice count more in market decisions? I've proven I know what works." Miguel felt something twist in his chest, because Eduardo wasn't entirely wrong. The market model depended on a fragile equality, everyone contributing, everyone benefiting roughly equally. But real life wasn't equal. People had different talents, different work ethics, different visions. How long could you maintain equality when natural differences wanted to assert themselves? "Can I tell you a story?" Miguel asked. Eduardo shrugged. "Go ahead." Miguel explains how a successful vendor at his market, Carlos Ruiz, strengthened the entire community by teaching others instead of guarding his advantage. What began as potential competition became collaboration, creating an ecosystem where everyone, including Carlos, thrived. Miguel makes it clear that the market prioritizes community over individual dominance, forcing Eduardo, a jeweler shaped by his father's unfulfilled struggle, to confront his fear of invisibility. Eduardo ultimately agrees to share his knowledge, choosing generosity alongside ambition. As the markets expand, Richard Thornton, the former banker, volunteers regularly and rebuilds his life with less money but more purpose. Though he mourns the losses of status and wealth, he finds deeper fulfillment and reconciliation with his values and family. Miguel admits he still doubts himself daily, but witnessing dignity, mentorship, and opportunity take root convinces him the work matters. 1 year later, the movement has grown to 17 markets across 10 cities, lifting hundreds of vendors. While the numbers are impressive, Miguel knows the true success lies in restored dignity, confidence, and community. Despite constant challenges and instability, he recognizes that they've proven another model is possible, one where community is an economy, dignity is currency, and meaningful change comes from shared values, not competition.